Great. Okay, good evening and welcome to the Crystal and Pentagon City Council. This is the December 11th, 2023 meeting. The overall mission of CPCC is to provide with staff support, periodic monitoring, evaluation, and identification of emerging issues and potential solutions on all dimensions of implementing the Crystal City Sector Plan and the Pentagon City Sector Plan to assure achievement of the plan's goals and objectives over the life of the plans. Our quorum is 9 people, and it looks like we're at about 12, so I think we're in good shape for tonight. So our agenda tonight, Matt's going to give us a development update. Then we'll do a follow-up on the community priorities that we discussed last time. Eric Castle from Crystal City and Corey Giacobbe from Aurora Highlands have joined us tonight, just to so we can close the loop on that. And then the folks from APA have a minor site plan amendment that's going in on Crystal House 3, so they'd like to give an overview of that. And then we'll finish up with an overview of the newly issued Forestry and Natural Resources Plan. Ryan Delaney from the county will present that, and we can talk about how, what kind of impacts that could have on how we plan out and implement our open space and green ribbon. Okay, Matt, do you want to pick it up?
Sure. Let me share my screen real quick. Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah.
You guys have all seen this before, but I'm going to first admit a few people that are coming into the lobby. All right. So what we wanted to provide is a very, very minor update from the October version of this presentation. This is where we started with more of a historical approval history, going back to 2013. This actually at the time allowed us to do more of a robust summary of applications, particularly in the context of community benefits. So I'm just going to continue with that order, I guess, in sequencing moving forward, just to kind of include everything we can. But this slide hasn't changed. Where we do have some new information are the more recently accepted applications that previously were just in the conceptual preliminary stage. So you'll see here, I think in the October version, there was only the River House neighborhood and perhaps the Pentagon Center phase development site plan. We've now added 2525 Crystal Drive, as well as the 12th Street Landing, which is the TSA site that Brookfield owns. So all of these are in various stages of community engagement, which I'll get to in a second, leaving us with the final additional application that is also nearing its acceptance, which is the Crystal Plaza Apartments. You can see here in this initial phase of development under number 20. So we are tracking these moving forward, and when we look at the upcoming schedule, there's a few remaining meetings in December. Obviously, the second half of the month is going to be fairly quiet around here, but many of these are going to continue into January and February, depending on whether or not a significant resubmission is anticipated or required, or if we are ready to immediately dive into the additional engagements, whether it be LRPC or SPRC. So this gives you a sense of what we know as of tonight. Next week, maybe 1 or 2 of these might be finalized, so I can pass those along. It's kind of a preview for January, but this is where we are right now, given the recent acceptances of those additional applications. And again, one of the things we continue to do is just summarize all the site plan applications once they've been approved, just to kind of track and total the density and land use variations between the different applications. So I suspect as we get into second half of next year, this table will continue to be updated as we go forward with that. So that's everything for my very brief development update. Happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thanks, Matt. Any questions?
Just on timing, that tomorrow is the last LRPC. We have no other meetings in December, right?
That is my understanding. The earliest I think we would be regrouping on any of those would be like middle or second half of January. So,
Great.
Ben, see your hand up?
Yeah, this is a question. I don't know where the right place to ask this is, so I may as well ask it now. There's some news that they're considering Potomac Yard for a new Wizards Capital Stadium. That is obviously going to have some impact on development and basically everything in our neighborhood if that actually ever happens, which I don't know. Maybe that's those who say this is a negotiating tactic certainly have some sway over my. But anyway, has there been discussions or county conversations about kind of the impact of that? Is this like way too early? And if so, then this a flag that I think that it deserves conversation at some point.
I'm happy to check into this. Nothing of this sort has ever reached me. So if it's happening, it is happening at a very, very high level. I do think it's a tactic by somebody for some purpose. It's almost so amusing, it's entertaining, but I will triple check to make sure there's any truth to it and follow up. So.
Great, thanks, Matt. I guess a question I had, Matt, is that we've got so many site plans starting to move into the pipeline. Is there a point at which you're having to marshal them because of the construction impacts, or is that just happening naturally?
Well, I think we're getting to a point where even the ones that have been approved a year or two ago continue to kind of just pause and hold, given the economic environment and interest rates and everything else. So I think the saturation of construction activity in that kind of concentrated, area hasn't quite materialized yet. But I suspect with the close coordination we have between our department and DES and the various applications, we're going to probably need to come back and just revisit some of the, plans that have been approved, at least in terms of, construction routes for, deliveries and hauling debris and any kind of closures. And really, once some of these approvals finally, feel like it's time to begin construction, what does that mean for where we are as a county in terms of our capital improvement projects that continue to happen in and around the area? So I think we just continue to monitor and see how many of these either approved or soon to be approved projects are finally ready to begin construction.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, any other questions for Matt? All right, thank you. Okay, let's move on to the community priorities follow-up. And we've got Eric and Corey with us. I have two slides to show you. Let me figure out how to do that. Okay. Okay, let's do that. Are you seeing that?
There we go.
Okay, great. Okay, so back in October, we had the three Civic Association presidents here. They presented some draft priorities that they got some feedback from the group on, and then they went off to talk with their civic associations about the priorities, get some input from them. There was a community meeting 2202 wide as well, and the priorities have now been finalized. I'll just walk through them quickly, and then I'll ask Eric and Corey if they have some other points they'd like to make. So, what happened from what you saw in October to today was there were tiers to the priorities before. Now there's just a simple list of priorities for the overall community. Then there were two areas where there were concerns about Route 1 and the Crystal City Underground. And so those have been really recategorized as concerns. There's another concern which came up during the meetings, which has to do with the safety and security in 22202. There's been certainly some increase in crime, and then certainly some kind of scary stuff happening that's gotten folks concerned. So we want to bring that to the county's attention. The other tangible change was in the open space. We added a, I'm not sure where I see it, but yeah, to connect it to an ask to connect the green ribbon to Crystal City proper, to extend the kind of the map of the green ribbon into Crystal City. Eric and Corey, would you like to add anything more to that?
Well, I wanted to say that I wanted to thank everyone who worked really hard to help put this together and to refine it. I mean, there was a lot of hours spent wordsmithing, and now I see a typo in there still, so that's disappointing. So I want to thank also the CPCC for allowing us to present this tonight. I don't really have anything to add because everything that we discussed has been pretty much distilled into this list of priorities and the concerns, but I feel like the items in the concerns list are also community priorities. The community feels really strongly about Route 1 staying elevated, and we also feel we really love the Crystal City Underground for its commuter route and as well as places for retail and in bad weather, and also the types of locations for the types of things that don't normally bubble up into retail space, such as art space and community activities. So that's the only thing that I wanted to add. Eric, did you have anything?
No, other than to state to make sure everybody understands, this is generally for CIP. And there's obviously a lot of concerns for, ongoing things, county budget every year and other things. So just to realize that these are the major priorities for CIP capital budgets and things like that. They, there's a ton of things, as you might imagine, there are concerns of people, as I said, police, a whole variety of a series of concerns. But in general, these are the things that require lots of money in CIP stuff, or humongous, I'll use the word, developer contributions and things like that. So this is more a capital budget priorities than oh my goodness, this is what we want our community to look like.
Thanks, Eric. I totally agree. Thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah, well put. Okay, well, thank you. So, what the next step is that CPCC will put together a cover letter and forward these to the county. There are two areas where we had some different perspectives. One is on Route 1 and the other is on the Crystal City Underground. So I've received a small snippet from JBG and the National Landing Bid folks on their perspective on Route 1 and the Underground. So what we'll do is we'll put those all into a letter, because I think it's better to just represent the two viewpoints than to try to mash them together. So those will go to the county. I will get that letter finalized over the next couple of days, and so we should get to the county before the end of the year. So next steps after that, Matt, we'd spoken a couple weeks ago on this, and you'd suggested that we plan to do a follow-up with the county manager sometime early next year.
That's right. It kind of resembles past practices where either for capital improvement plan purposes or identifying other priorities, that follow-up conversation, I think, really allows the county manager and others, particularly in CPHD, to kind of just sit down with the group or key stakeholders, representatives, and just kind of verify our understanding as a county of what this says and maybe doesn't say, and kind of present that dialogue, I guess, particularly knowing that later or in a few months, we're going to be re-engaging the entire CIP process since it's been 2 years following the last one. So I think timing of that could be very conducive to that.
Great. Hey, Pam, sorry, I saw your hand there.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
The document that I was looking at was the one that ARCA sent a link to, which has kind of a background information and then the livability priorities. And I have a couple editorial comments on it. The paragraph that's right above the livability priorities that starts this series of meetings in the fall of 2023 agreed upon. The series of meetings didn't agree upon anything. It's the participants in this series of meetings agreed. So that's one thing. And in the paragraph above, when you talk about, in the same paragraph, you talk about security and airport and construction noise and stuff. I would add safety to security as well, and maybe emphasize that a little bit more. And that was a huge issue at the general meeting that we had, especially for ACA people. So those are my two comments. Other than that, that was a great document. Thank you.
But what is it that she's referring to, since there's nothing on the screen that reflects what she's talking about?
Okay, I think I know what she's talking about. There was a document that I think Carol took a first draft at that gave the background of this process, as well as what the concerns and ideas were that bubbled up from the community meeting. And we talked about whittling it down to just one page. A lot of us worked together to do that, and I sent that out last week, and I don't think that it made it to this presentation tonight.
Okay, so it's very interesting because I started the draft and I haven't seen it since. So that one page I have not seen.
Well,
Okay.
this is actually 2 pages, and it's the first page is basically the background. And I think if you're sending a letter, you need the background rather than just saying what the priorities are. I thought it was a great 2-page document.
Okay, well then I had my hand up to say this because I think there's a lot of confusion out there, and I think we need to make it absolutely clear that there are 2 paths going on. Livability was providing input to the CPCC so that the CPCC could respond to the county, but livability reserves its own right to send separately to the county with a larger cover letter, which is what I originally drafted. So when Pam was talking about that cover letter, I think that's the livability input to the county, not the CPC. Can we clarify what we're talking about?
I actually agree with you, Carol.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That the document that you started and that we continued with and tightened it up and clarified it. I have been trying to get the other 2 presidents to agree with me that that's our final say on it. Still waiting to hear that, but we do have a couple of days to go.
Yeah, ARCA's voting on this 2-page thing at their meeting on Wednesday, is my understanding, which is why I read it and said, oh.
Does ARCA have a meeting on Wednesday, or are you talking about the AHCA meeting?
I thought it was ARCA, but I could be wrong.
AHCA is having a meeting on Wednesday, and the document that we're going to be voting on is on our website right now.
Our ARCA doesn't meet until January.
Okay, well then it was ACA.
Right.
So the document that we'll be talking about at the meeting on Wednesday night is up on our website. And it's the one that Carol started, and we then took our hand at changing it, and we've been trying to involve the other 2 civic associations in that process.
I guess that's the one I read, and those are my editorial comments on it.
Okay, thanks, Pam. Pam, if you'll have a
Okay.
look at the document as it stands on our website now, I would love to hear your comments on that before Wednesday night.
Okay.
Thanks, Pam. Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I'm turning off my microphone now.
Ben, you see, so it's kind of cool. Teams will actually numbers the hands at this point. Never noticed that. But Ben, you're number 1 now. Go ahead.
Thanks. I just have a clarifying, maybe statement or question to build off of what Eric was saying about the focus of these, in particular, right, that especially now that there's a reframing around housing being a concern and stating that the goal right here is to indicate, or tell me if this is right or wrong, that it's not that livability is taking or recommending a position about housing writ large or affordable housing writ large in the community, but rather in the specific context of the CIP and community benefits, and saying that, you know, that wouldn't be as much a priority in terms of affordable housing funding in those contexts rather than in other contexts. My assumption is not making a statement then, I think. And I imagine that it's helpful to clarify that both here and in other contexts as well.
Yeah, so Ben, the focus of this is really on these big ticket needs, and really focus on the CIP, and that putting that focus on allowed a pretty diverse set of stakeholders to kind of come together. I think the document that the folks are talking about for livability itself, we can get into some of the complementary information that's certainly important to the context of the CIP, but CPCC is really focused on getting these big community needs funded. Matt?
Yeah, just as a follow-up to that, and I suspect whenever a meeting gets scheduled in early next year that this will probably resurface, but I think the guidance is very helpful in the context of the way in which community benefits are negotiated with, you know, private developers, and how does that strategy evolve, I guess, beyond this year and the current slate of applications. I will say, though, I think with Crystal Houses, particularly as we continue to go through and learn more about what has to happen there, and maybe even as the Crystal Houses 5 site, which doesn't really have as much detail right now, there is, I think, a common understanding, at least on our side, that further investment by the county will be needed to pull that off and make all of that happen. I think there's a perception that the investment that have been made so far by the Conservancy and Amazon essentially pays for everything, and I think that's not the case, and there's significant additional costs that have to be incurred, which likely going to fall on the county. So I think the balancing act is, how do we still meet that commitment and get us to a specific timeline that has been discussed for Crystal Houses, while still addressing and reacting to the things that are in that updated priorities list.
Is that funding been firmed up in terms of what the bill is, or is it still being sorted?
I think it's still being sorted, particularly now that we're starting to see some site plan amendments coming in for the initial phases of Crystal Houses. But I think there's still a lot more work to be done on that side.
Okay.
On the financial side.
Yeah, thanks. Susan.
Yes. Along the same lines, the discussion about livability priorities that were big CIP ticket items. The idea is, as I perceived it, was not so much that emphasis is that housing has gone away, but simply that other needs should rise up in priority to support the housing that we will be getting. So as the housing is coming in, which doesn't happen immediately, it's sort of gradually over a period of time, we want to have other priorities that are closer to ready to go, or more supported, more funded. So it's not forget about housing, it's more of a sort of just a balancing picture.
Yeah, that's a good point, Susan, and I agree with that. It's keeping everything moving along kind of in some kind of balance. And these priorities that we are assembling here are, as Eric said, they're humongous. They're a decade away. The Arlington Mill Community Center, I think that took 20 years to get built. So it's going got to single, every journey, single step. We gotta start moving out. Any other comments? Okay. All right. So as I said, we'll put together the cover letter, and we'll send that out to the county over the next week, and then sometime in the spring, we'll get a small group of the CPCC folks and Civic Association presidents, and hopefully, get on a meeting with the county manager's office and get a sense of how they see things and what the prospects are for moving some of this forward. Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay, so let's move to the next topic, and that is we have APA here tonight, and Danny Ross specifically. Hi, Danny. Who has some presentation material to go over Crystal Houses 3. There's a minor site plan amendment coming in. So I'll hand it to you, Danny. Oh, good. That's the next question. Can you share? Excellent. Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks, Michael. Thank you, everyone, for your time and letting us present Crystal House 3 to you this evening. I'm joined by Nick Cummings, our land use attorney, Kevin Pennington, our architect, and I believe Mitch Crispell will be joining us as well. So some of these are a repeat of the last presentation, so I'll try to be brief on this, but it's just important to us to restate our mission. APA exists to provide affordable housing and resident-centered programming to help our residents make the most of their home. So, we're a mission-driven nonprofit, and our focus is not just providing the housing, but providing the housing in meaningful ways that will help our residents to thrive. And so that's something that we focus on. We are growing. We are no longer just in Arlington. We are now in 5 jurisdictions throughout the DMV. We are committed to racial justice. Our resident services division, really, again, they strive for social impact. That group is 16-person and growing. They're operating through a Ready Lens. It's each project, they kind of tailor the services that are provided based on the needs of the population. And so that is true here for Crystal House as well. And so kind of the overview of the whole project, we're at Crystal House between 18th, 22nd, Eads and Fern. The existing Crystal House 1 and 2 towers that are there today, surrounded by surface parking. And so this slide is the same as the last one you saw last time, with a couple exceptions. Crystal House 6 is updated now with the approved floor plate there, and then this is the proposed Crystal House 3 floor plate, which we'll get into. But in aggregate, Crystal House will develop in 6 phases, multiple buildings that are both for rent and for sale. So it is a multi-generational, economically diverse campus, which will include around 844 new units. Most of those are affordable. At least 655 affordable units are provided. And that's affordable, meaning affordable to the area median income for the 30 to 80% ranges. And so this delivers out in phases through the year 2030. It will deliver 2 public parks. And of course, that parking that we're building on gets replaced in the various buildings, as well as new resident parking. Crystal House 6 will be the first phase, and that will start in Q3 of next year. There will be some preliminary work ahead of that because the utilities for Crystal House 1 go right through our site. So that'll start early next year. And then everything has been carefully crafted, how we move around the buildings and still allow Crystal Houses 1 and 2 to operate. Those are fully operational multifamily buildings. and will remain so through construction. So sort of the timing on how everything lays out is sort of critical for us. So Crystal House 3 being the phase following a year after Crystal House 6, and then the 4 cell units developed by our partner EYA along Fern, and then EYA is also on Crystal House 4, and then that would be followed by Crystal House 5 by APA as well. So just to refresh your memory and kind of, again, why we're here tonight, we went through several community meetings. We met with planning, and there were several iterations of this design before the one you see before you today, which is the approved design. And throughout this process and our engagement, we made several improvements to that. So that's, again, why we're here this evening, is to do the same with Crystal House 3. And so Crystal House 3, and you can see that's the prominent corner at 18th and Eads, is affordable for families, and the median income's 30 to 80%. And so one change from the approved plan set was to include more 3-bedroom units, and that's to cater more to families, of course. And then again, getting back to APA's mission and our robust resident services, we have an opportunity here to really fine tune the amenity spaces and cater more specifically to our residents' needs. And so we're doing so by providing 2 lobbies. The lobby that you see here at 18th and Eads, and then there's another one at 20th and Eads, are both accompanied with office spaces that include staff. So we've got some really good visibility as people move through the lobbies. We provide community rooms that are divisible and designed for multiple activities, all run by APA Resident Services. Of course, we have the fitness center. There's leasing office, resident services office. So multiple offices, all specifically designed for the function of the building. We're also designing a specific office space for county service provider, who's someone who's offsite, who will come and visit and work with their clients within the building. We are designing play spaces, both indoor and outdoor, and we're kind of working through that design to have it be for multi-age span. The park actually will deliver with a play space as well, and so we're kind of figuring out the best way and the safest places for different ages to play, and working that into the design. The new design includes a roof terrace on the 7th level, as well as a 2nd level courtyard that will be with barbecues and sort of tie into the community rooms and amenity spaces. We're setting aside a telehealth center, and so that's a place where residents can go have a private conversation with their doctor in a secure place that that they have internet connection and can have meaningful telehealth type meetings. So this updated design has 3 levels of parking, which would include 389 spaces. We've also moved the bike parking from the underground garage up onto the to the main level, so you can bike right in off the street. So that's an improvement there. And like with Crystal House 6, we are seeking Earthcraft Gold certification for the sustainability piece. And with that, I'd actually like to hand it off to Kevin to take you through an update on the building's massing.
Great, thank you, Danny. Yeah, this first slide shows the massing and development. The top image is the approved massing, and the proposed massing is on the bottom. The middle is showing the transition, and we'll explain why. The current 4.1 is only 6 stories at the corner of 18th and Eads. This is not consistent with the Crystal City sector plan that seeks to have prominence at the corners and the full building height represented in those locations. To address this issue, we moved the space contained on the interior wing, shown in pink there, to the corner to bring it to full height. So you can see that little arrow pointing to the corner where we moved that. This move resulted in two very positive benefits for us. It opened up the space between Crystal House 1 and this new CH3 tower. So any of the residents that are in Crystal House 1 looking at this will have greater separation there. Sorry, can whoever that is mute themselves? Great, thank you. Okay, and the other big positive benefit of this, if you could go back to that last slide, Danny, is it provided us an opportunity to put in the terrace. You see it on the bottom in green, and that's an area that would be directly accessible from the amenity space on the inside of the building. And we're programming that now for different recreational spaces for adults as well as the children. Yeah, if you could jump to the next slide now. So this slide is an elevation of the east-facing facade along Eid Street, and it's showing the progression of the design from the previously approved elevation on the top to what we're proposing on the bottom. We honored the approved design by keeping the building's basic design moves intact. The building similarly massed into north and south regions of the facade. The two halves are divided by a recessed feature shown in blue, as did the original approved design as well, had that separation gasket, if you will, between the buildings. The proposed building meets the sector plan criteria of a defined base, middle, and top, similar to the current design as well. The new tower, page right, shows proposed extension to 11 stories and the corner feature at 18th and Eads. This is the most prominent corner of the building and the closest point to the metro station. And as you'll see in one of the later slides, it feels like it just needs to be that as it fits into the neighborhood a little bit better. If you could go, to the next slide. This massing slide shows the front and back of the proposed building. Notable features are the cutbacks of the facade. If you look at the left image, the rear view, you can see the elevated terrace on the right side, shown with the green bubble up at it's at the 7th floor level. And on the left side, there's an inside notch that we did to make sure that we are more than 60 feet away from the existing building at that height. So that explains why those two notches are in place. This also shows the garage and loading entries at the rear of the building, which is where it's currently planned. And you can see that that terrace area above it, which is a large area that we're currently programming. If you could go to the next slide, please. Oh, actually, sorry, get back. There's something else I wanted to mention. The street view on the right, it does show the articulated massing of the proposed design. To break up this massing, we're split it up into 3 waves. You can see them on this right image. One's kind of a light tan, another one's a taupey color, and the last one is red. Those are actually waves in the facade that are going from the 3rd floor up to the 9th level. Both corners will have a feature tower to help announce the building entry points. The massing, this massing on 18th Street, shown on the image on the right, we're trying to drop the scale down to the adjacent future Crystal House 6 that has approved. And the white feature that you should see on that far right side is part of that step down that we're doing. Next slide, please. So this is the conceptual view of the terrace. We're planning for residential grilling areas, kids play areas. That's kind of a large, just open play field right now. And again, we're looking at the programming for it and exactly what it wants to be. There'll also be bioretention in this area. Some of the perimeter that you're seeing is bioretention that's using to provide a little bit of separation between the adjacent residents and this public space out here. Next slide. This is the street level view. It's showing the massing at the base It's really intended to bring the massing, this massing of a pretty large building down to a human scale. There's a wide sidewalk, bike path, planters and bioretention up against the building. Building materials are going to be very high quality, a lot of masonry. We'll be using high quality fiber cement panels like Nichia, and it's pretty much used where it's not masonry or metal. Next slide, please. And the last slide is the bird's eye view. It's really good for putting this building in context with the surrounding buildings. You can see CH1 directly behind it, CH3 to the right, and then across 18th Street, CH2 is to the left, and across 18th Street to the right, you can see the adjoining construction, which is all at this same 110-foot height. We're using green roofs and bioretention planters to handle most of the stormwater management, hopefully all. And you can see the area on the main roof. We're not showing it as green, but you'll see a lot of solar panels up there. We're working with the engineers to try to minimize the amount of mechanical penthouse areas and maximizing green roof. And then we'll work with the owner to get us, get solar panels if we can make that happen as well. I think that's it.
Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, so we're available for your questions. And again, thank you so much for allowing us to present tonight.
Great.
And I'm so sorry that I joined late, but I'm Mitch Crispell. I'm a director of real estate development here working with Danny. Happy to help answer questions.
Great. Well, thanks very much. Yeah, so we've got some questions. We'll start with Jill. Go ahead, Jill. Jill, you're on mute. Hey, Jill, we'll come back to you. Go ahead, Carol.
Okay, just a quick question. You talked about county service office space. Are you talking about like for DHR and AFAC, or what is that?
So we're working with county health services, and so they will provide on-site services through Arlington County. So there'll be a caseworker for their clients that live in the building.
So it's not a general county services, it's specific to health?
That's right.
Okay, the reason I asked that is because affordable housing, I'm thinking about the deliveries that you get for AFAC quite frequently, and also the services that DHR provides. Would that be available to them?
Yeah, in all of our buildings in Arlington, we coordinate AFAC, and we always create space for it. It's either in like the main lobby entryway or in the community room, and we would do the same thing here.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks. Pam.
Hi, thank you. I have several questions. How long is the building along Eads? How many feet?
About 430, 440 feet.
Okay, glad it's not 600. I'm sure you all understand the importance of 18th and Eads and how that is a huge connection to, certainly for everyone who lives in Crystal House, but also for the community beyond Crystal House to get to all of the services and transit facilities in Crystal City. And this is how we connect. We go through that corner. And the metro is a block away. It's very easy to get to, but if you force people to go around this huge building every day, they're not going to be happy. And that includes your own tenants. And that was an unresolved issue from the original approval when this was a commercial site. And this is something that we will still push for. I mean, I do not personally need this. I live on 19th. I could easily get over to 18th. But for people who live at Crystal House, they want to get to the corner of 18th and Eads by as direct a line as possible. And unless you provide access through that corner, you're not doing that. Right now, people go through the parking lot. You stand there at the corner, you'll see people popping up every minute. Pop, 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 all these people, they live there. And you will make it that much harder for all of the tenants unless you figure out how to have an access through the corner of the building as close as possible. We do this in Met Park. There are 2 of them on Fern Street where they have created little spaces for pedestrians to go through that are right next to the building. It doesn't give you entrance to the buildings, but it is a clear space for pedestrians to go through. So I really hope that you can figure out how to do that. And my other questions are,
Oh, just before you get to your next
Sure.
question, can I just give a quick response there?
Sure.
So we think that the way we've programmed the site plan is going to do exactly what you've just requested, in the sense of making a safer experience for pedestrians who are trying to get over to 18th Street and get to the metro. Between the existing building, Crystal House 3 and Crystal House 6, there'll be new landscape sidewalks so that people won't be walking through a active parking lot. They'll be able to walk along a nice sidewalk and then go through that gateway that you saw in one of the first images, which will be a much more engaging pedestrian experience out to 18th Street. And then they'll be able to cross at a crosswalk versus maybe trying to jaywalk across Eads, right there at 18th and Eads. So we think that the site plan as proposed totally meets the goal of ensuring really, smooth access for Crystal House residents and folks who live on the other side of the community.
Okay, from the plans that you're showing, we can't see that. So I would like to see plans that absolutely in detail show the routes of pedestrians that match their desire lines. And that's going to be just.
Could we just put up the presentation again? Because I actually think we can show you real quick on that last slide.
Okay.
I think you'll be able to see it. Because we agree, we want people to be able to have access, right, to the metro. I mean, it's going to be our residents, it's going to be the folks that we're partnering with. So maybe that very last one right there. So you can see the way that the building is configured. You'll just kind of walk between the existing building and our new building. There'll be a new sidewalk that will run alongside of that building, and people will go out through the gateway there on the far right of the image, straight out to 18th. And that's basically right at the corner. There's just a little bit of the building that sticks back into 18th Street, which maybe another shot would show. Yeah, so that's just a little bit of the building sticking back, but there's that gateway right there between Crystal House 6 and 3, where folks will be able to come out, right there, on a nice landscaped sidewalk instead of walking through a parking lot. And then they'll pop right out and just walk a tiny bit up 18th and then cross at the crosswalk.
Okay, I think I need to see that as an actual flat layout.
In plan, yeah.
Yeah,
well, we have it, just not tonight, but we
I
can
can't
send
see
it
it
to
like
you.
this.
Yeah.
You can see the beginning of it on this site plan. I mean, Pam,
Oh, yeah,
this
there
is
it
pretty
is.
much it. It's not illustrating exactly what Mitchell's referring to with sort of some of the improvements as clearly as we might have for, future meetings. But the concept is the same, that you've got that pathway through the center of the site that, the sector plan called for, and then you could cut down right where you would normally between CH1 and CH3. And Mitchell's,
that one is useless.
emphasizing we've got a sidewalk there, and then you'll come out really close to that corner. So at the end of the day, I think we're talking about maybe, 20 seconds difference.
Right.
Yeah,
And
Right.
also,
I just emphasize again that the direction that people want to go overall is from the far corner on the southwest corner to the northeast corner. We don't need to come out at 20th Street. 20th Street is a horrible intersection, and it's a horrible way to cross Route 1. We want to get to 18th and East, and we want to do that as directly as possible.
Yeah, and I think that diagonal cutting through the site that Mitchell was describing is exactly what everybody's hoping to see.
Yeah, I think, like I said, you can see it right here. I think our site plan achieves the goal that you're describing in a really well landscaped way. There will be a positive pedestrian experience. Will be a big improvement over cutting through a parking lot.
And I can't tell from your diagrams what the what the width of the sidewalk is. I guess that's by Crystal House 1, because right now that's a really dinky little sidewalk, and how people safely maneuver around vehicles that are going into your parking. I'm glad that you've moved the parking, the underground parking, because it used to be further north, and that was definitely a conflict point. So that's good that you've moved it. But it's still, this is basically a driveway through there, right? from
mean,
the center out, and you've got sidewalks
It's like
on
more of
both
an
sides?
alley. It's more of an alleyway, but I think the sidewalks will be a standard width. I mean, I think that's probably required. Kevin, is that right?
And what is the standard width there?
They're wide. It's 5 feet or 6 feet wide. I'm not sure. I believe it's 5.
Yeah, and
It-
we're
it's
talking an
certainly not
internal
nowhere
driveway, not something with, open to traffic.
Yeah, I know.
And it's an immense improvement over the parking lot, obviously. Now, of course, formally, the sort of things that the sector plan calls for, that the county planning staff has identified, are the mid-block crossing cutting through the site along the park. And that has a generous width, had landscaping requirements, and was carefully designed through the original process in 2019. And then, of course, you have the much improved streetscape along Eads and 18th, which is again where staff would say we're channeling traffic generally onto our actual streets. But in total recognition of the priorities that you've laid out, we do have that pathway through the site. There are some internal sidewalks. We'll confirm the exact width, but I think those are going to help a lot too.
Okay, we want to see that. And what is the clear zone for the sidewalks on Eads? Is it 6 feet?
They are not changing with this application, so it's whatever was approved in 2019, what the sector plan calls for. Either Kevin or I'll pull it up real quick, though, while others are asking questions.
Yeah, I think it's probably 6 feet. My final question is, where will Pudo be?
What, Pudo? I'm sorry.
Yeah, where you
She
can do
can pick up and drop off.
Yeah,
Oh.
it's
So Dan,
always a problem.
we can pull the site plan back up, and then Kevin can speak to anything that he's thought about very specifically. But we obviously have, Eid Street in front of the building, potentially some parking there, but we also have the internal drive streets, which are going to be really convenient for your Ubers. Because again, those are internal drive aisles, not actually streets, and should be lower trafficked.
Yeah,
Right.
that's correct, Nick. It's on the left-hand side of the building that you see there on that internal drive.
And there's a lobby over there.
Yes.
Okay.
It's the main
that's-
lobby.
It needs to be close to the
That's the main
lobby.
Yep, agreed.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the main lobby. There's a minor lobby at the 18th and Eads corner.
Okay, Ben? Ben Devanzo.
Sorry if I missed this during the presentation. I was distracted for a couple of minutes with kid, but correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like I remember that the original version of this had a cafe or retail space of some kind at 18th and Eads. Is it still there?
So we had an option there to do either a tenant amenity or true retail, depending on what folks thought would work once we were actually delivering a building. With this application and just the amount of retail in general in the area, including just up the street at the Towers development that was just approved, but also on 23rd Street. What works best here for this use is lobby amenity space. So we still got an active use there. And Ben, if you recall, the origin of putting that cafe / amenity space in there was that an earlier rendition of the project in 2019, maybe even 2018 really, had a unit right at that corner with, windows facing out and stuff. And folks, including probably you and others, said, hey, that doesn't really work for such a busy corner. We want something that helps activate that space. So we have an entrance to the building there with a lobby and some amenity space.
Okay. I mean, yeah, it's true that there's not other retail in that corner, but it would have been a nice spot for a cafe, but understand that there is, retail elsewhere. Thanks.
You may well get a cafe right up the street with Robert's building, but we'll see.
Great, thanks, Ben. Judy?
Yeah, I would just like to echo Pam's comments about the fact that this is basically a 2-block long building and no way to penetrate into or out of the property. It may be a disparaging comment to say that this is a landscape sidewalk is going to be better than cutting through the parking lot, but that's what people are used to doing. And once there's a 2-block long building there with no break in between, people are not like it. And I think it doesn't serve the neighborhood beyond Fern, beyond your site very well. And just as a point of illustration, the Lofts building, which goes from Fern to Eads, has a break between it, which provides access to Costco and Amazon and the parks and all of that for not only the Lofts, but all of Crystal Towers. So I think it's a mistake to just assume that you can have a 2-block long building facade with probably not terribly generous sidewalks and no place for pickup and drop off. And I think what it illustrates is that the definition of a minor site plan means that other than a conversation like we're having now, and we basically, and maybe a meeting with one of the local groups, the community doesn't really have much of an opportunity to revisit what changes you're providing. So I appreciate the presentation and the information that you're sharing, but it isn't really available to the wider group the way a site plan would be. So I'm sorry that we're not having that opportunity. We didn't have it with Crystal 6 either. That's an unfortunate planning issue. I think that may be more a county issue than applicants, who certainly don't want to have any more public meetings than are absolutely required. Thank you.
Understood, Judy. Just wanted to briefly say we do have pickup and drop off space. That's what Kevin was talking about. But then otherwise, I mean, I'm with you. It's a planning thing. And it's something for the county to look at structurally. But I will say that the length of the building and the lack of a break in the building is consistent from the 2019 approval. Nothing's changed in that sense, the massing of the building. And this obviously was an issue that was discussed at length in SPRC in 2019 and was brought to the Planning Commission and then to the board. I think the Planning Commission even made a motion on it. And the board obviously approved the project without the break in the building and found the design acceptable. So, I completely understand that folks still don't agree with that, especially in this group, but it's not a change from the 2019 approval. So I just want to make that point.
And just also to let you in a little bit to the thinking, we think what we're providing is going to be great, but also B, any break would take away units. And we're trying to provide the most affordable housing we can to serve the dire need in Arlington County. So I think that's the trade-off that we're really making. It's like a slightly more convenient walk versus providing more homes to people that need them. That's kind of our calculus. And then the last piece also is, this concept that when you're walking by something interesting, it feels like a shorter walk than when you're walking by a dead space. I think that will apply here too. Walking through a parking lot is always going to feel like a longer walk, even if it's the same distance than walking by a new beautiful KGD designed building with all this amenity space on the first floor that people are going to be seeing into. It's going to activate that walk for people in a way that I think is really going to be a big improvement. So I just wanted to offer that.
Okay, thank you. Matt?
That's a nice plug for the architect. Two things. One, from a process perspective, I think folks on our side definitely, I think, heard everybody loud and clear. So we're evaluating options for an improved engagement process for this one and likely subsequent amendments that are coming in. Once that outreach, I think, is specified, we'll definitely follow up to signal what that looks like. But really, I think just having a more robust conversation, acknowledging that this is still a site plan amendment, but there's variations to that. And I think enough of you have raised that question that not all site plan amendments are the same. And I think had this been submitted holistically as one large application, we probably having a slightly different conversation. Having said that, and I'll just throw my 2 cents in here, there are conflicting guidance and requirements when speaking about the intersection of Eads and 18th. And I think speaking on behalf of what the applicant is struggling with is the sector plan does force sites like this one to frame that intersection. And the challenge here is how do you have an effective building meeting the requirements, the build 2 lines and everything else that's in the sector plan, while still, I think, accommodating the most convenient pathways for pedestrians, bicyclists, and other modes of travel in and out of the site, particularly given that diagonal connection that gets you to the metro station. I think just common sense, which I'm hoping we can introduce into the conversation, is that I think we need to give Arlingtonians a little bit more credit in terms of being able to identify their path once they've navigated it once and twice and kind of got their bearings. I don't see how this is going to be a critical issue, but it's certainly signaling trade-offs that we explored initially back in 2019 about how do we meet as many goals and objectives as possible, at least on this intersection, knowing all the other connectivity and convenience aspects that this entire block delivers. And it's not easy, and I don't think there's going to be a perfect solution here, but I think cutting diagonally directly into that intersection does have significant consequences, and we need to weigh those.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Ben.
I had one more question, actually, based on the comment that was you're making about, you know, a new building can be more interesting than walking past a parking lot, which actually isn't always true. Like walking past Crystal Loft or the building fronting along 15th Street can be a slog. Like it's a really long block, and it's all the same. And what can make it more interesting if you kind of is if and when residents personalize, right? They put things up in their buildings, they allow lights, and they have decorations. Is the kind of design of the building going to allow that in terms of both like design elements in terms of like electrical plugs on balconies, if there are balconies, I couldn't tell, or the ability to put things in windows in terms of policies? Is there opportunity for personalization in order to both create kind of more interest as you walk along and to break up a really long facade beyond kind of architectural elements?
Kevin, do you want to take that one?
Sure. There's right now there's not any there are no balconies. We're providing princess balconies, so there won't be the ability for someone to put up Christmas lights or something like that, for instance. On the inside, I think it's an APA decision, but I don't believe there's anything that they would do to prohibit their residents from putting up Christmas lights on their windows.
No. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
Architectural means, though, were, of course, as you referenced, Ben, used to help break up the facade. And everybody on our team is conscious of the length of the building, as we are in any, you know, application like this where you have a larger building, a longer building, and staff is looking at that as well. And so that's been part of their, you know, substantive comments in the application so far, is to continue to look at the way that we are treating the facade. And so that's something we pay a lot of attention to, is that visual interest for sure.
Thanks. And I'd say I'd encourage that just broadly when we see kind of applications. It's something I've been bringing up a lot in the River House context, and would encourage kind of everyone who sits on this committee to think about like how we can, I sort of call it the like stoop culture, but like how we can encourage applications and design elements that really seem on the fringes, but like it really matters a lot. If there's no plug on your balcony, you can't put up lights, and that makes your building a lot less interesting. Or if you have policies that, you know, residents can't put up, you know, signs or in their windows, or, you know, there's no planters, like that makes a block, I think that's a world of difference. So as much for like the county and staff and everyone else on here, as much as for this one particular building.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Hey, Jill, come back to you.
I think that I'm working now.
Okay,
Yes?
great.
Okay,
Yep,
great.
we're here.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
The
Sorry for the
mute
wait.
wouldn't come unstuck. Sorry about that. I had one quick question, one quick follow-up on the discussion of the paths earlier. I was wondering, are those going to be open to the whole community passing through, or are they for residents of the Crystal House area only to access?
There is no plan to bar access. The only public access easements would be over the parks, and then over the pathway along the park to the center of the site, and on the sidewalks along 18th, Eads, etc. But there's no plan to bar access otherwise, nor would there be any realistic way to do that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then I think I heard this, people can ride bikes through them as well. Is that right? Okay,
Yeah,
so that's true.
absolutely.
Okay, great.
In fact, that might be the most inviting way to travel through them, given that they're, you know, internal driveway streets that are going to be fairly barely safe for cyclists.
Yeah.
Not being dedicated bike lanes, but yeah.
Okay. And then the other one was something that we all were touching on a little bit, but I was curious why there was not a mini SPRC for given the number of components that are changed. I heard that there wasn't, but I was just wondering if someone could help me understand why.
I think it's a question for Mr. Matuzik.
Why so much hasn't changed from the 2019 approval?
Why there's not a mini SPRC? I think you answered it earlier, but Joe may not have been plugged in.
I heard it referred to that, I guess the county decided that it wasn't necessary? Is that how that decision's made?
The county's evolving thinking on this is we initially started with, I think, the more technical description of how this does not meet a major site plan amendment, given the way the chunks in which it is being submitted gradually, which is true. However, in light of feedback, in light of the scale of the property and the regular flow of changes that are being submitted, we are contemplating options for something that's in the middle of the two, and making sure that we have a more strategic engagement process for this and subsequent phases for Crystal houses. So we'll continue to experiment with that.
So it sounds like it kind of changed on the fly, and then maybe going back, there might have been. Is that right?
I wouldn't call it a mini SPRC because, again, we have an approval. This is just changing some key elements. So the process did take place in 2019. I think given the context of the changes, though, and the scale of the buildings, I think we can do better in terms of having a strategic conversation with the community. So.
Oh, I see. So it's the scale of the buildings is part of it.
And we are learning as we're going. So I think the feedback has been heard. And I think people felt that the initial phase or two have not been as adequate. So we want to address that.
Okay. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Joe. Pam.
Yes, I would like to reiterate to Matt, please, please, please have this SPRC meeting and keep us posted on it. It is so important. And as the other buildings come online, please make sure that you do this as well. As we have written, this was approved in 2019. The world has changed. We didn't have Amazon. Transportation has changed. Everything has changed in our neighborhood. The plans have changed. The purpose of the buildings have changed. It is time to look at things again. So please do that. Thank you.
One last thing I'll mention on that, beyond just the clarifying point, that some of the things you listed, I think were generally known in December of 2019. Or
Amazon was approved the same day that this was.
Right.
Exactly. Same afternoon.
So I don't think everything has changed. And I want to just kind of credit staff and applicants in terms of our ability to forecast and predict what some of these projects at the time might deliver. Nonetheless, I get your overall point in terms of what you're trying to push for. The one thing I would just caution everybody is to overemphasize the labeling of the engagement and rather the substantive nature and what we're trying to accomplish. So whatever this series of meetings or engagement process ends up being called, if it doesn't include the words or the letters SPRC, I don't want everybody to believe that it's somehow flawed or inadequate. I think I would just push everybody to really look at how many engagements, what are we trying to accomplish, the sequencing of conversations, and how does that get us to an ultimate county board hearing. And I think we're going to do our best job to make sure that they're meaningful and cover all the bases, regardless of what their label might be. And hopefully we can do a better job than we did with the last one.
Great, thanks, Matt. And I think my comment is along those lines. I think what I'm missing from these discussions, and this is this great presentation, really appreciate it, is the ability for you guys to go back, take our comments, take them on board, and then come back and talk to us again. That's what we get out of SPRCs. If you have 2 or 3 SPRCs, or as Matt used, whatever you want to call the meeting, does allow everybody to kind of go back, think about it, come back and follow up, and we all get to know that we all heard each other. I would certainly be interested in how many units you actually do lose if you can break that 450-foot building up by putting a pedestrian passage through there, for instance. Those are the kinds of things I think we get a better understanding of the site if we can have 2 engagements and everybody does some homework in between. So, okay, thank you very much for coming, and really appreciate the engagement.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can I say something again?
Yeah, all right. Pam.
Thank you. And what Mike said is absolutely right. What I miss from having meetings like this, besides that they're really inefficient because you're going to various groups, is not having everybody at the table who needs to be at the table. It needs to be public. It needs to be promoted. It needs to be recorded. And as Mike said, we need to be able to give you feedback and give you the opportunity to continue our dialogue. So thank you so much. And this was a great beginning presentation. Thank you.
Have a good night. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's move to the last presentation of the evening. I think we have Ryan Delaney with us tonight. Are you there, Ryan? Hey, Ryan.
I am.
So the county recently updated the forestry and resource and urban resources or natural resources plan, and been hearing some really good things about it, Ryan. So with our open space challenges in our area, the Green Ribbon is a public-private opportunity to kind of thread these biophilic pathways through our community. We're really interested in kind of what you guys have come up with and your thoughts on how it may apply to the Pentagon and Crystal City area.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Michael. I will pull up the slides and get started. And just one quick note, the draft is done. We are going to the board this coming Saturday, so please don't jinx it. All right, let me get our slides up and we'll get going. All right, can everybody see that? All right, so my name is Ryan Delaney. I'm a planner with the Department of Parks and Recreation. I'm the project manager for this update to the Forestry and Natural Resources Plan. And as Mr. Dow said, I will be presenting a short update on the plan and its connections to the Crystal City, Pentagon City area as we close out our planning process. So thank you all for the invite. I'll start at kind of a high level with a quick overview of the plan and how it fits into county planning. So the Forestry and Natural Resources Plan, or FNRP for short, is a new element of the county's comprehensive plan and will serve really as our guiding document for policies related to the integrated management of our natural resources and the urban forest across the county. It updates and replaces two older plans, the Urban Forest Master Plan and the Natural Resources Management Plan, both of which had been sub-elements of the Public Spaces Master Plan and dealt primarily with public property. So for the first time, from a planning perspective at least, we're not only looking at all of our natural resources as an interconnected system, but as an interconnected system that covers not just public parks or natural areas, but the built environment and private property as well. And like I mentioned, we're nearly at the end of a long process. So after over 3 years of work, we'll be bringing the final draft to the county board to be considered for adoption this Saturday. We had just brought it to the Planning Commission last week, and they unanimously voted to move it forward. So we are excited about that. And just touching briefly on how we developed the plan, just again, for some background or context, we kicked off in 2020. And the planning process included an interdepartmental core team from across the county government and APS to bring in diverse perspectives to our planning effort. And it's also been supported by the Natural Resources Joint Advisory Group, which is a county manager appointed committee consisting of representatives from the Forestry and Natural Resources Commission, the Parks and Recreation Commission, and the Climate Change, Energy, and Environment Commission. And we've met with them regularly throughout the process. They've been kind of our primary public forum and oversight body. The process included a lot of benchmarking research in the early stages to learn more about current practices and innovative programs or lessons learned from peer jurisdictions. And the communities we looked at most closely were Fairfax, Albemarle, and Prince William counties in Virginia, Montgomery County in Maryland, and the cities of Seattle, Washington, and Richmond, Virginia. And though we drew on examples from a lot of other communities like DC and Bellevue, Washington, and even Savannah, Georgia. So Lastly, and certainly not least, the plan's been shaped by 3 rounds of public engagement that started well before, excuse me, we finished or started writing the first draft. And hopefully, that created opportunities not only for Arlingtonians to learn a bit more about our environment and how the county manages it, but influence how we plan for its future. So across, although complicated by COVID, across these 3 engagements, we had a lot of different outreach methods, including online comment forms and educational materials. And also, as things reopened, bilingual pop-up events across the county, in-person open houses, as well as virtual public meetings and many commission and committee briefings. Overall, generating over 5,000 comments that helped us shape the plan and our planning approach. So like I mentioned earlier, the FNRP is a combined update to the Urban Forest Master Plan and Natural Resources Management Plan. And really, we tried to go beyond combining these elements into just a single document and develop an integrated perspective on environmental planning that emphasizes equity, a community-wide approach based in education and volunteerism, and a focus on reconnecting nature to daily life. So in that vein, the FNRP really follows from the county's equity and biophilic cities resolutions and some recent planning examples like the Pentagon City Sector Plan. And it focuses on trying to break down the artificial distinction between nature as something else sort of over there and the built environment where we conduct most of our daily lives, and creating more space for natural elements alongside us through biophilic design, and ensuring that the benefits of these resources are equitably available regardless of people's backgrounds. So the planning team, as we sort of close out this process, believe that this approach is not just critical to the conservation of our natural resources, but also to quality of life in the county. So that brings us to what's actually in the plan. Similar to other comp plan elements, we have an executive summary, a vision statement, and a selection of priority actions that help summarize the plan up front, a long form narrative introduction and planning context to provide some background on how this fits into Arlington's comprehensive plan. And that's followed by the strategic directions, which is where the plan's policy recommendations live. And those strategic directions are supported by an implementation framework and appendices that illustrate sort of how we're going to realize the vision that the plan lays out. I'll go a bit more in depth on these last elements over the next few slides. So starting with the plan's policy recommendations. This slide here highlights our strategic directions. These are the broad policy areas that are sort of the framework of the plan. In each of the strategic directions, the plan includes specific recommendations called action steps that are the more specific implementation measures that the plan puts forward. In the current draft, there's 83 individual action steps. And the strategic directions that you see here are conservation, climate mitigation, adaptation and resilience, biodiversity, and operations. And together they cover policy recommendations ranging from conserving the quality and extent of our tree canopy and directing resources to climate vulnerable hotspots, to encouraging community involvement in environmental management and reintroducing nature into our neighborhoods through biophilic design. Sorry about that. Out of all of these recommendations, the draft highlights 10 priority actions. These 10 were selected to emphasize the major changes that the FNRP recommends over our current policies, highlight our equity recommendations, elevate actions that staff felt would be most impactful, and reflect what we learned through community about the community's priorities through public engagement. This list includes cornerstone conservation goals like reestablishing and maintaining at least 40% tree canopy countywide, while ensuring that 70% of those canopy trees are native species, acquiring land for conservation purposes, and establishing connectivity between nodes of habitat. It also includes a selection of recommendations emphasizing the FNRP's focus on creating more space for natural resources and green infrastructure in the built environment through both local actions and state level actions like our legislative agenda. And lastly, this selection highlights the plan's equity measures, both in the maintenance and establishment of green infrastructure, and emphasizes the plan's community-based approach to conservation through outreach and volunteerism, as well as through traditional environmental regulation. So in addition to those priority actions, we do include a full implementation framework similar to what you may see in other county comp plan elements or in the Pentagon City Sector Plan, for example, where each recommendation in the plan is included, along with some high-level details about the proposed timing or responsible parties and partners, some initial planning level cost estimates, and potential funding sources. So if you really want to get super wonky, this is the section of the plan you might want to dig into. And then lastly, the plan contains 7 appendices that support the recommendations that we just explored and provide some additional context and background covering the topics here on the slide, ranging from a deep dive into sort of the benefits of nature for mental and physical health, to a history of race and housing in Arlington and its intersection with tree canopy, as well as a lot of sort of more technical appendices detailing some of the implementation steps, like our native plant standard that we want to bring forward, and then definitions and acronyms that help orient folks to the plan. So that brings us to kind of the setup for the evening. Matt had mentioned to me that you all were curious about the intersections between the FNRP and the Pentagon City Sector Plan's biophilic design guidance, elements like the green ribbon and tree canopy elements. So I'm here to hopefully provide a little bit of an overview as a lead into the Q&A. So the short answer is there's actually quite a few intersections. In a lot of ways, the Pentagon City Sector Plan's guidance on tree canopy, on biophilic design, on the green ribbons served as a model for some of these policy recommendations that the FNRP is really designed to bring to the county at large. So for example, the FNRP references the Pentagon City Sector Plan's guidance as a model for how to bring green infrastructure, trees, and vegetation to the private realm, both in exhibits like this one on the slide and in more detail regarding things like the green ribbon later in the document. It's also served as a really positive example for how to incorporate tree canopy and vegetation targets in sector plans and other county planning efforts from the beginning. So we included recommendations to incorporate those types of targets and goals into county planning efforts in the future, whether those be new sector plans, revisions to sector plans, revisions to comp plan elements, or even things like park master planning or public site reviews, for example, new county facilities or APS sites. And in kind of a cool example of a positive feedback loop, the draft FNRP was then referenced in the Plan Langston study and influenced some of the tree canopy and greenway goals in there. So things are starting to come full circle a little bit. The green ribbon that the Pentagon City Sector Plan sort of pioneered, and its focus on not just providing an amenity for residents and visitors, but also a means to disperse green space and the benefits of nature throughout a developed area, served as an inspiration for the FNRP's recommendations that live in Strategic Direction 3, biodiversity, around conservation corridors, linking these nodes of habitat like our parks across the county, and direction to seek even small scale conservation opportunities, whether they be rain gardens or backyard habitats or native plantings and road rights of way, to small, think sub half an acre acquisition opportunities that can add to this sort of web of ecological function across the county. And lastly, as I mentioned earlier, the plan identifies climate vulnerable hotspots and recommends that the county direct resources to these areas. Those policy recommendations are based on American Forest's tree equity analysis, which is sort of an analysis of tree canopy mapped against various socioeconomic factors like those shown on the map here. One of those tree equity areas is actually in Pentagon City, and so the plan recommends that we focus on these areas first, generally, as we seek to improve tree canopy, access to green space, and additional green infrastructure opportunities in collaboration with local communities. And so I think at a high level, at least, what the FNRP brings to green space and public space planning in your all's neighborhoods is a refinement of some of the ideas that were initiated by the Livability 22202 work and the Pentagon City Sector Plan. For example, the FNRP includes additional guidance on biophilic design, trying to clearly communicate to both, whether they be county project managers or developers for private sites, what we mean when we say biophilic design, including examples from a variety of different project types, public sites, streetscapes, private development, as well as recommendations to incorporate biophilic design more substantively into our development review and site plan processes. It tries to develop the idea of the green ribbon in Pentagon City into a countywide network of conservation corridors, and importantly, kind of directs staff to update inventories like our tree canopy study, our native plants inventory that will influence future planning and the implementation of some of these in your all's neighborhoods and elsewhere across the county. And ultimately, the plan's priorities will eventually end up reflected in things like park master plans and the design of privately owned public spaces in the area, and hopefully reinforce some of the initial guidance in the sector plan. So hopefully that's a bit of a window into the plan's development process, helps orient you all to some of the at least the high level policy items in the plan, and starts to make that connection to planning efforts in Crystal City and Pentagon City. In terms of next steps, we're going to be bringing the draft to the county board to be considered for adoption this coming weekend at the December board meeting, like I mentioned. And if adopted, we'll be moving into implementation planning in the new year while we begin to kick off our 2024 tree canopy study to start updating some of that baseline data and really help refine some of the high level policy recommendations into the document into actionable neighborhood by neighborhood planning targets. So great. That is the FNRP in a nutshell. Thank you all for your time, and happy to hand it back to you all for discussion or answer any questions that you may have. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Ryan. So yeah, that's really interesting to see what you've done with the plan update. I think we had a couple of questions. One of the questions that had come up while we were doing the priorities update this fall was a inquiry desire to look at the green ribbon and see to what degree they could support these, as you said, like mini conservation corridors. And what do you have to do to turn a green a green pathway into something that actually is sustainably a corridor that either wildlife or birds or flora can propagate along? Is there different considerations for that?
Yeah, there are. And, the sort of squishy answer is a lot of things and it depends. But the real answer is, I think, related to, and we get into this in a little bit more detail in the plan, related in large part to the target species. So, for example, it seems unlikely that the green ribbon would be a migration corridor for mid-sized to large mammals, but it could be great habitat for birds and insects. It can be great seed dispersal corridors for native plants and things of that nature. So part of the inventory work and sort of design and incentivizing work that the plan recommends takes into account that target species and sort of this ecosystem level planning where we try to understand where some of our known bird migrations are, where some of our populations of different animals are, soil types that can support different species of native plants, and work sort of within those constraints and target some of our, ultimately target the design of like small public spaces or landscaping to those concerns. And one of the ways that the plan recommends doing that is by exploring a native plant requirement that kind of goes beyond our native plant preferred policy now. So starting at sort of a foundational level by designing spaces that can accommodate the type of flora we want to encourage, that can be sort of the basis of the basis of the ecosystems we're hoping to restore or reconnect. So hopefully that's at least the start of an answer. I don't know if that's totally helpful or totally responsive, but please.
Oh yeah. So okay. So this would. So the first step is doing an inventory. Can we get to the top of the list?
Yeah. Yeah, these sort of sequencing of some of these things is what we're going to dive into in January. But the short answer is I think so, because this action 3.3 around our conservation corridors is one of the 10 priority actions. And we do have a head start on a lot of these inventories through our natural lands GIS layer, which is based on plant communities, through the upcoming work that we'll be doing in this year on, in early 2024 on the tree canopy study, which is going to incorporate a lot of these qualitative data about species composition and forest health, as well as the sort of raw numbers. So, watch this space, but that sort of inventory work is our first step for a lot of these things. And I think 2024 is really going to be the the planning and data collection year for a lot of these efforts.
That could be really timely, Matt. I'm thinking about the River House, which is such a substantial development, and then the master planning for Virginia Highlands Park. It would be great to have that kind of inventory in hand when we go into those the planning of that of Virginia Highlands Park. Carol.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan, very much. I'm going to have to read this plan a lot more closely based upon what you've said tonight. But my question has to do with the implementation phase and what you just said about native plants and what authorities the county has, what enforcement you can do for it. And just give you an example of this, I do tours of Crystal City. And what I usually do is I start in Virginia Highlands Park and I walk through Pentagon City, Met Park, into Crystal City. And one of the things I comment on is that when you move from Pentagon City, from the developers who have worked on the western part of it, into the area where Amazon has come in with Met Park, it's night and day, because you move from invasive species, non-local species, suddenly moving into native plants. What implementation authority would you have to try to insist that developers or even private people do the native plants instead of the other kinds of species?
Sure. I think the answer for individual private homeowners, for example, is not much authority. So the plan does lay out this sort of collaboration and education and incentive-based approach to that type of development. One of the things that had been in the plan as a recommendation was to update the county's weed ordinance to re-incentivize folks having naturalized landscapes. There was, some potential issues with code enforcement and running into the unmanaged growth stipulations in the existing language. I'm happy to report that we did adopt that code change before this plan came to the board. So we were able to knock it out and replace it with, as a recommendation, and replace it with a fun, highlight of an early success. That's kind of the angle that we need to take with individual private property owners, by right development, things of that nature, where we don't have that authority. In terms of things we can do to require native plants on as part of redevelopments, site plans, landscapes, packages, that sort of thing. There is a model that we're following from the city of Alexandria that's taken sort of a graduated approach of gradually ratcheting up the percentage requirement of native plants across a variety of categories, from trees down to sort of herbs. That is, I think, a good model from the mechanical standpoint. It would require us to change things like the landscape standards, update the zoning ordinance, re-examine some of our site plan conditions. These are all things that we'll be delving into in the new year after adoption, because there's a lot of recommendations in this plan that would need to be executed through similar tools. And we may, in working with our colleagues at CPHD, be able to bucket some of them into, fewer actions. But the important thing is that where we have that sort of regulatory authority to review the plant palette and the landscapes sort of designs through our site plan review process, for example, we have a good model from Alexandria that we're building on, and the sort of capacity of these native plant nurseries, which had been a limiting factor in the past and prompted Alexandria to kind of take that graduated approach of, gradually upping those percentages, is on its way to resolution. So we were able to sort of jump in with our recommendation at a higher percentage point. So those are kind of the two ways on the private side. And then on the public side, essentially holding the county and APS to those same standards for things like park master plans, new public facilities, and ensuring that we're leading by example. So those are kind of the three prongs generally of that, at least in terms of the policy recommendations in the plan, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks, Carol. Any other questions for anyone? Okay. All righty. Well, thanks very much, Ryan. This is really interesting, and I think we'll probably want to follow up when the new year comes to see about some of the tree canopy inventories. Matt, anything we could do to kind of prompt that?
I mean, we'll speak with DPR and Ryan in particular, particularly with the mindset of upcoming site plan review committee meetings on River House, which initially, if it's not the first, will definitely be the second meeting that will focus on biophilia and the public spaces and the green ribbon. So knowing that that's coming up sooner rather than later, as opposed to the latter part of the process, what can we get done in time for that to have the best conversation possible?
Okay, great. Okay, well, thanks again, Ryan.
Yeah, no problem. And I'll put a link to the current/final draft of the plan in the chat here, just for folks who want to dive in. And please direct all comments and questions about the tree canopy study to our urban forest team, Vincent in particular. He'll be the project manager for that. We haven't gotten the schedule and everything established yet. We're formally kicking it off in January. So maybe, a 10-month road from there, but just yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.
Okay. All right. So that's our agenda for this evening. We've come through it pretty smartly. I think our next meeting will be sometime after the new year. And I think probably typically we do it in the March timeframe. And any other comments or questions, meeting topics that we want to get ahead of for March? I'm eager to hear any suggestions. Okay. All right. Well, thanks very much. Let's wrap it up for tonight, and wish you all a good holiday, and we'll see you in the new year. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.